Okay, we've got more news to get to. We're going to talk about Stella Assange and John Bolton. We're also going to talk about the transgender backlash from a charity, a trans charity. Yes, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. The fallout continues for Mermaids, which is a taxpayer-funded charity in the United Kingdom that has been caught doing what may be unethical things.
Yes, people saying, hey, what's going on with the military move? Well, at the beginning of the show, we covered all of that. So you can watch the replay a little bit later. But yes, some big moves this afternoon there. All right, let's talk about Julian Assange. Obviously, there's a big event happening this weekend in Washington, D.C., a Julian Assange event, free Julian Assange event. So people can look that up and follow that. Of course, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is behind bars at a maximum security prison, one of the harshest prisons in all of the UK, Belmarsh prison. And what are his crimes? Publishing classified information that revealed the war crimes, the cover-up in Afghanistan and Iraq, and what the United States and the UK were doing to push this awful war. It showed exactly what the imperialists were doing. And he's a journalist. He didn't hack into a computer, like log into government computers to get this information. And of course, the empires didn't like this. Mike Pompeo, in fact, the former head of the CIA, basically said, "Yeah, this was our goal. Like our goal was to we want to bring this guy down. We wanted to kill him."
Yes, to end his life.
End his life is what Mike Pompeo said. So they're trying to bring him to the United States. They're trying to go through this extradition to try to get him under the Espionage Act behind bars. He faces a possible prison sentence of, get this, 175 years if convicted in the United States. It will be absolute crushing to free speech and journalism if this is allowed to happen. But there was an unbelievable exchange last night between his wife, Stella Assange, and war criminal John Bolton from the United States. It's rare that you get to see television like this. First, I want to show you Piers Morgan asking Stella Assange, why is your husband behind bars and how has he been suffering? Watch this.
Where is this going to go? What do you hope to achieve? What do you think may happen here?
Well, Julian faces a potential sentence in the United States of 175 years for doing journalistic work, for receiving information from a source and publishing it. And it was in the public interest. It was about U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he revealed tens of thousands of civilian deaths that had not been acknowledged before, and war crimes that have never been prosecuted.
Let me play devil's advocate. As a journalist, I thought that a lot of the stuff that appeared in the New York Times and the Guardian and various other newspapers who acted in collusion with Julian and WikiLeaks over those revelations, they redacted a lot of the more sensitive stuff which might lead to people's lives being impacted by the revelations. WikiLeaks didn't. They just put it all out. As a journalist, you would never do that. So they weren't really acting as journalists. They were acting as, here it all is, and work it out for yourselves, whereas the newspaper editors acted like what I would say proper journalists should do, which is to be careful about exactly what you put in the public domain. Do you accept that?
I don't accept it because it's not true. WikiLeaks did actually redact all of those publications from the Manning that Manning gave to WikiLeaks. And in fact, it was in cooperation with those newspapers. They told WikiLeaks what had to be redacted, and then WikiLeaks published it redacted. In fact, WikiLeaks withheld 15,000 documents from the Afghan war logs, got criticized over redacting too much.
Oh.
Did you read them, Mr. Piers Morgan?
Actually, no, they redacted a lot, and they were actually taken to task about that. Like, WikiLeaks is redacting documents? Like, did he even understand what he was talking about? So it goes on from there. So that's just the palate. That's just the appetizer.
It's the amuse-bouche.
Yes, it's to get you started. So 175 years behind bars. He then brings in war criminal Ambassador John Bolton to get his perspective on Assange's trial. Listen to this. So he turns then to war criminal John Bolton for perspective. Watch.
Why is America so intent on bringing Julian Assange to unbelievably draconian justice of 175 years, i.e. the rest of his life in prison?
Well, I think that's a small amount of the sentence he actually deserves. He's committed clear criminal activity. He's no more a journalist than the chair I'm sitting on. The information that he divulged did, in fact, put many people in jeopardy. It undercut the ability of the United States to have confidential diplomatic communications, not just with other foreign governments, but in many countries with dissidents, people who, even speaking to American diplomats, could find themselves in trouble. And so, you know, he's been complaining about his treatment over the past period of time. He's the one who sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Now he faces extradition to the United States. I presume he will get due process in the United Kingdom to determine whether extradition should go forward. And when he gets to the United States, he'll get due process here. And I hope he gets at least 176 years in jail for what he did.
What a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
175, no, 176 years in prison.
It's because of... go ahead.
Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember it, the big part of this takeaway was that what Assange and Manning exposed was an attack on civilians that killed something like upwards of like 80 civilians. Isn't that what like the big takeaway was? So what sensitive like diplomatic channels were harmed in that? Like it's so bizarre.
Right.
I'm not sure. And I think the United States harmed its own diplomatic relationships when it was tapping heads of states' phones, as we learned about, such as Angela Merkel.
Right.
So that had nothing to do. Julian Assange didn't do that.
So 176 years in jail. He's such a, I mean, he's a disaster. So now watch Stella's response to John Bolton.
Stella?
Well, of course, Ambassador Bolton is kind of the ideological nemesis of Julian. He has, during his time for the Bush administration and later the Trump administration, sought to undermine the international legal system, ensure that the U.S. is not under the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. And if it was, Mr. Bolton might in fact, be prosecuted under the ICC. He was one of the chief cheerleaders of the Iraq War, which Julian then exposed through these leaks. So he has a conflict of interest here.
Ambassador Bolton?
Well, that's ridiculous. I have an opinion. So does Assange's wife. I guess we both get to speak them. You know, I think that what she fears is being brought to the United States and having Assange put under trial. If he's innocent, she can at least show reasonable doubt that he's not guilty, he'll go free. What's she worried about?
Just laughs.
Well, she just said you should be under trial, but you are changing the circumstances so that you cannot be.
Right.
So if you believe so heartily in trials, let's all have one. Then
right.
You have one too.
You are a war criminal, John Bolton. You are a war criminal. And we won't be a part of the International Criminal Court because we know that you would be tried for these violations of international law.
Right.
So we won't join it as the United States because we know we would be vilified. These guys would go to prison. A whole lot of them.
She's doing a great job keeping her composure because I want to go all Ricky Lake on him.
Well, and he's like, you're Assange's wife. Well, I guess Assange's wife. She has a first name, by the way.
Yes.
Like we have to call you Ambassador Bolton. You can call her by her. She's not just Julian Assange's wife. She's a lawyer, by the way. She's very intelligent, and she's been amazing through all of this. Watch. So yes, that was her response. Watch now. Watch Bolton's sort of dickish response to all of this.
Let her say Julian Assange cannot get a fair trial in America. Let her say it.
Okay.
Well, he cannot get a fair trial in America because he is being prosecuted under the Espionage Act, and he cannot bring a public interest defense. He cannot say, I published this information because it was in the public interest, precisely because it is under the Espionage Act. And it is the first time that a publisher has ever been prosecuted under this act. It's something that constitutional lawyers in the United States have been warning could happen for the past 50 years. And the New York Times and the Washington Post say this prosecution strikes at the heart of the First Amendment.
Yes.
Wow, she is on fire.
Yeah. So I love the way that Caitlin Johnstone put it so well in her newsletter this morning. She said, an appearance on Piers Morgan Uncensored, the wife of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange explained that the threat her husband's persecution poses to press freedoms around the world and the profound suffering his imprisonment has inflicted upon him. As some kind of bizarre counterbalance to the family of a persecuted journalist pleading for basic human rights, Morgan invited on John Bolton, the man who was the national security advisor to President Trump when Assange was imprisoned under a U.S. arrest warrant, which, if you think about it, is kind of like having a sex trafficking victim on your show and then bringing in Ghislaine Maxwell for a balanced perspective.
Yeah,
it really is. Like, who's the exact opposite and worst person we could possibly find that exemplifies war criminality?
Yeah, because she is personification of pain and humanity,
Right.
of what's happening to this family. They have two small children, and she doesn't play that card of like, I have two small boys, we have the right to raise them as a family. She's not playing that card at all, but she is a bit too personable, and so they need to put her juxtaposed with the man who actually wants her to continue hurting, wants
Right.
to deny her family existence, and she just stands up to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
She's amazing. So this weekend in Washington, D.C., if you happen to be in Washington, D.C., there is a Free Julian Assange rally. It's going to be big. Hopefully tens of thousands of people will be out in Washington, D.C. So if you are in that area and you want to come out and support it, absolutely do that. We'll link it up in the show description below where you can find out more information about this event this weekend. But these Free Julian Assange events are happening around the world, of course. Roger Waters just showed up at one and gave an impassioned speech, so you can find them. But this is a big one. This is going to be a very big one in Washington. So we will be watching that.